When my 7-year-old son, Benny, stood on our Thanksgiving dinner table and asked his father about the poison in my medicine, 12 family members stopped mid-bite, forks suspended in air, and I realized I was sitting at a table full of people who wanted me dead. The crystal chandelier above cast shadows across their frozen faces. My mother-in-law, Constance, had gravy dripping from her serving spoon. My brother-in-law, Trent's bourbon glass, hovered at his lips. Even my father-in-law, Gerald, who never showed emotion about anything, had his mouth hanging open like a caught fish. "Daddy?" Benny's small voice cut through the silence again. "Should I show them the pictures I took of you putting the white powder in Mommy's pills? That was 3 hours ago. Now I'm sitting in a police station wrapped in a blanket that smells like disinfectant, watching my husband get processed for attempted murder. But I should start from the beginning, from when I first should have seen the signs. My name is Dina. I'm 34 years old, and until tonight, I thought I was just a regular elementary school teacher married to a man who'd lost his way. I teach 4th grade at Riverside Elementary, where kids draw me pictures of sunflowers and write stories about dragons. It's the kind of job that doesn't pay much, but fills your heart. At least that's what I used to tell myself when Victor would complain about our finances. Victor is my husband. Was? Is? I don't know what tense to use for someone who spent 6 months slowly poisoning you. He's 36, used to be an insurance broker before the company downsized. He has this way of running his hand through his dark hair when he's frustrated, which lately had been every single day. We met at a coffee shop 10 years ago when he accidentally grabbed my latte instead of his Americano. "Guess we're coffee soulmates," he'd said with this crooked smile that made me forget I was running late for work. Our son Benny is 7, but sometimes I swear he's got an old soul trapped in that little body. He has Victor's dark hair but my green eyes, and this way of tilting his head when he's really paying attention to something, like a little detective. Turns out that's exactly what he'd been doing for the past 3 months, documenting everything with an old iPhone I'd given him to play Minecraft on. Then there's Victor's family. God, where do I even start with them? Constance, my mother-in-law, is 62 years old and rules the Whitman family like a medieval queen. She has this silver bob that never moves, even in wind, and wears pearls to grocery shop. The first time Victor brought me home, she looked me up and down and said, "Well, she's certainly not what we expected." That should have been my first red flag, but I was 24 and in love and thought I could win her over with kindness and good intentions. Gerald, my father-in-law, is 64 and has made a fortune in commercial real estate. He speaks maybe 10 words at every family gathering, but when Constance talks, he nods along like a bobblehead on a dashboard. I used to feel sorry for him until I realized his silence was complicity, not weakness. Trent is Victor's older brother, 38, divorced, and bitter about it. His wife left him 2 years ago and took half of everything. Now he spends family dinners making dark jokes about how some problems solve themselves if you're patient enough. He drives a Range Rover he can't afford and smells perpetually like bourbon, an expensive cologne. Nadine, Victor's younger sister, is 32 and has hated me since day one. She's one of those women who peaked in college and never got over it. Still wears her sorority letters on workout clothes and posts inspirational quotes on Instagram between selfies at wine bars. She especially hated that Victor married me instead of her best friend, a plastic surgeon's daughter named Brittany, who now lives in Miami with her 3rd husband. These are the people who sat around a Thanksgiving table 3 hours ago, casually discussing my murder like they were planning a vacation. They used words like insurance money and timeline and making it look natural while passing around green bean casseroles and pretending to be grateful. But they didn't count on Benny. They didn't count on a 7-year-old boy who loved his mother more than he feared his father. They didn't count on a child who'd learned to use technology before he could tie his shoes, who'd been secretly documenting their conspiracy with the dedication of a tiny FBI agent. And they certainly didn't count on him standing up on that dinner table between the turkey and the sweet potatoes to expose them all. The story really begins 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, on a drizzly October evening when Victor came home with insurance papers and a strange urgency in his voice. I was at the kitchen table, grading spelling tests while Benny worked on his dinosaur diorama for school. The house smelled like the potato soup I'd made in the slow cooker, one of those budget meals I'd perfected since becoming our family's sole breadwinner. "Dina, we need to talk about the life insurance," Victor said, sliding a thick manila folder across our kitchen counter. The papers fanned out like a deck of cards, all official seals in tiny print. "We should increase your policy, just in case something happens." I looked up from Madison's creative spelling of butterfly spelled as butterfly and frowned. "We can barely afford groceries, Victor." "Why would we increase insurance premiums?" "It's just smart planning. You're the only one working right now." He wouldn't meet my eyes, focusing instead on arranging the papers in perfect parallel lines. "If something happened to you, Benny and I would have nothing." "Nothing's gonna happen to Mommy," Benny said without looking up from his T-Rex, carefully applying green paint to its scales. "She's careful. She looks both, weighs twice before crossing the street." Victor's jaw tightened. "It's just paperwork, buddy. Adult stuff." That should have been my first real warning, but I was exhausted. Teaching 24 fourth graders all day, then coming home to budget spreadsheets and Victor's increasingly dark moods had worn me down to nothing. I signed where he pointed, thinking about how I needed to buy new shoes for Benny because his toes were pushing through his current pair. Victor had been unemployed for 6 months by then. Whitman Insurance Group, where he'd worked for 8 years, had eliminated his entire department in April. Restructuring, they called it. Getting screwed, Victor called it, usually after his third beer of the evening. He'd gone from a confident man in tailored suits to someone who stayed in pajamas until noon, sending out resumes that disappeared into the digital void. The rejection had changed him, or maybe it had revealed him. He started taking phone calls in the garage, speaking in hushed tones I could never quite make out. When I asked who he was talking to, he'd say headhunters or networking contacts, but his eyes would shift away like Benny's did when he claimed he'd brushed his teeth but hadn't. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, I started feeling sick. It began with headaches that felt like someone was tightening a vice around my skull. Then came the dizziness, these waves that would hit me in the middle of teaching, making me grip my desk while discussing fractions. The nausea was worst in the mornings, so bad I could barely keep down toast. "You need to see someone," Victor insisted, suddenly concerned about my health in a way that felt performative. "I'll call Dr. Whitmore. He's an old friend from college." Dr. Whitmore's office was in a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax preparation service, which should have been red flag number 2. The waiting room had fake plants covered in dust and magazines from 2019. He barely examined me, just nodded while Victor described my symptoms like he was the patient instead of me. "Classic anxiety presentation," Dr. Whitmore announced, already reaching for his prescription pad. "The stress of being the sole breadwinner, managing a household, teaching children all day, these will help regulate your system." He handed me a prescription for something called Zalexin. "Take one every morning with food. You'll feel better in no time." The pills came in a generic white bottle, no pharmacy label, which Dr. Whitmore explained was because he had samples that would save us money. Victor was so helpful after that, bringing me the pill each morning with orange juice, watching me swallow it before kissing my forehead. "I just want you to feel better," he'd say. "I need you healthy." The invitation to Thanksgiving at his parents' estate came through Constance, delivered by Victor like he'd won the lottery. "Mom wants to host the whole family this year. She specifically asked that you come." This was shocking. In 9 years of marriage, Constance had never specifically requested my presence anywhere. Usually I was tolerated at family gatherings like an unfortunate plus one, someone to be endured between courses. "Maybe Mom's finally warming up to you," Victor said, though his smile looked practiced, like he'd rehearsed it in the mirror. Benny had been watching everything with those sharp green eyes. I'd catch him staring at Victor when the pills came out, or listening at doorways when those garage phone calls happened. He'd started sleeping in our bed most nights, curling against me like he was standing guard. "I protect Mommy," he'd whisper in the dark. "That's my job." I thought it was sweet then. Now I know he meant it literally. Thanksgiving Day arrived gray and cold, with the kind of November chill that cuts through your coat no matter how many layers you wear. As we drove through Connecticut's winding roads toward the Whitman estate, dead leaves swirled across the windshield like brown ghosts. Benny sat in the back seat, unusually quiet, his small fingers wrapped tight around the straps of his backpack. "I don't like going there, Mommy," he said as we pulled into the circular driveway. "They're mean to you." "It's just dinner, sweetheart. We'll be home by 8. I tried to sound reassuring, but my hands were shaking as I unbuckled my seatbelt. The morning's pill had made me foggy, and the driveway seemed to tilt as I stood. The Whitman estate sprawled across 5 acres, all marble columns and perfect landscaping that cost more than my yearly salary to maintain. Constance greeted us at the door wearing winter white cashmere and her trademark pearls, her smile sharp as broken glass. "Dina, you look tired," she said instead of hello. "Victor, help your father with the wine. Benny, the children's table is in the sunroom." "He sits with me," I said, my hand firm on Benny's shoulder. Her eyebrow arched. How progressive. The dining room was set for 14, each place setting more elaborate than anything in my own home. Crystal glasses caught the light from the chandelier, throwing rainbow fragments across the mahogany table. As relatives arrived, I felt like I was watching a play where everyone knew their lines except me. Uncle Raymond and Aunt Meredith whispered in the corner, stopping abruptly when I passed. Cousin Janet hugged Victor but barely nodded at me. Trent arrived already drunk, his girlfriend Amber tottering on heels, too high for her skill level, both of them reeking of bourbon and bad decisions. During appetizers in the living room, Constance raised her glass of champagne. "To family," she said. Her eyes locked on mine with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "And to changes coming soon." "Big changes," Trent added, swaying slightly. "Some might say, life-changing." Victor laughed, but it sounded forced, like a cough disguised as amusement. "Let's just enjoy dinner." We moved to the ideal dining room where Gerald carved the turkey with surgical precision. I was seated between Victor and Nadine, who kept refilling my wine glass even though I hadn't asked her to. "You really should eat more," Nadine said, piling stuffing on my plate. "You're getting so thin. Stress, I suppose." The conversation started normally enough, complaints about traffic and discussions of Black Friday plans, but as the wine flowed, tongues loosened, and the masks began slipping. Trent started it, 3 bourbons deep and bitter as the cranberry sauce. "You know what I'm thankful for? That my ex-wife's new husband has to deal with her now. Though sometimes I think it would have been easier if she'd just had an accident. Cheaper than divorce lawyers." "Trent," Gerald warned, but his voice lacked conviction. "What? We're all thinking it. Some marriages just need to end permanently. Clean breaks are better than messy divorces." "Especially when there's good insurance money involved," Uncle Raymond added, earning a sharp look from Victor that Raymond didn't seem to notice or care about. Nadine laughed, the sound like a knife scraping porcelain. "Remember that woman in the news? The one whose family helped her husband resolve things? $20 million can buy a lot of happiness. New life, new opportunities." "Nadine," Victor said, his hand tightening on his fork. But Constance placed her manicured hand on his arm, her wedding ring catching the light. "Oh, Victor, we're just talking hypothetically. Though you must admit, insurance money would finally let you be happy. Start that business you've always wanted, that consulting firm you used to dream about before, well, before certain responsibilities tied you down." She looked directly at me when she said it. Some wives are just anchors, holding their husbands back from their true potential. My heart was racing now, the room starting to spin in that familiar way that had been happening since I started the medication. But through the fog, I was understanding. This wasn't casual conversation. This was a confession. "Mommy doesn't look good," Benny said loudly, standing up in his chair. "Is it because of the medicine Daddy gives you every morning? The one he keeps locked in the garage instead of the medicine cabinet?" The room went silent. 14 people frozen like a photograph, wine glasses halfway to lips, forks suspended over plates. Victor's face drained of color. "Benny, what are you talking about?" But my 7-year-old son, my protector, my little detective, wasn't done. He looked his father straight in the eye with a courage I didn't know a child could possess. "I saw you put stuff in Mommy's pills, the white powder from the container in the garage, the one with the skull picture on it, the one that says rat poison in big red letters." The room erupted into chaos. Constance shot up from her chair, knocking over her wine glass, the red liquid spreading across the white tablecloth like blood. "Victor, control your child. He's lying," Nadine shrieked, but her voice cracked with panic. "Kids make things up all the time." But I found my voice pushing through the fog of medication and shock. I stood slowly, gripping the edge of the table for support, my legs shaking but my resolve hardening like steel. "No, let him speak. Benny, what else did you see?" My son reached into his backpack, the one he'd been clutching in the car, and pulled out my old iPhone, the one I'd given him months ago for games. "I took pictures, Mommy, and videos. Daddy and Grandma talking on the phone about insurance. Grandma said 3 more weeks and everything would be perfect. Uncle Trent said some wives just need to disappear." "That's taken out of context," Trent stammered, stumbling backward, nearly knocking over his chair. I pulled out my own phone from my purse, my fingers trembling but steady enough to hit record. "Then let's get some context right now. I've been recording this entire dinner." It was a lie, but they didn't know that. Their guilty faces told me everything. Every word about insurance money, about wives disappearing, about anchors holding husbands back. Victor reached for me, his hand extended like he was approaching a spooked animal. "Dina, you're being paranoid. It's the medication making you imagine things." "The medication you insisted I take?" My voice grew stronger with each word. "From your friend who's not even a real psychiatrist?" "What are you talking about?" Gerald spoke for the first time, his usual silence broken by confusion. "I looked him up last week when the pills made me so sick I could barely stand. Dr. Whitmore lost his medical license 5 years ago for illegally distributing controlled substances. He's not allowed to practice medicine, but somehow he's writing prescriptions and providing unmarked pills." Victor's mask finally cracked completely. "You don't understand the pressure I've been under. Mom said if we just waited a little longer, if we were patient, everything would work out." "Work out?" I turned to face Constance, who stood rigid as a statue, her face pale beneath her perfect makeup. "You mean my death would work out? How much is my life worth to you? 1 million? 2? 3, Amber said drunkenly from her seat, then gasped and covered her mouth. Trent grabbed her arm so hard she yelped. $3 million, I repeated, the number tasting like poison in my mouth. "That's what you valued my life at. That's what you were willing to kill me for." Benny climbed onto his chair, his small face fierce with determination. "I sent everything to Mrs. Morrison. All the pictures, all the videos, everything. She said if Mommy got sick at dinner, she'd call the police." Mrs. Morrison was his second-grade teacher and my closest friend at school. We talked about my symptoms last week, and she'd begged me to see a real doctor, not Victor's friend. I hadn't told her my suspicions, but apparently my 7-year-old son had. "You little brat!" Constance snarled, lunging toward Benny. "You've ruined everything!" I moved faster than I thought possible, pulling Benny against me, shielding him with my body. "Don't you dare touch my son." "Our son," Victor said, but the words were hollow. "Number he stopped being your son the moment you decided to orphan him for money." Gerald stood slowly, his face gray with realization. "Constance, tell me this isn't true. Tell me you didn't plan to murder this girl." "Girl?" Constance laughed bitterly. "She's a nobody, a public school teacher who trapped our son with a pregnancy. She was never supposed to be part of this family." "But murder?" Gerald's voice broke. "You planned murder in our home?" "We all agreed," Constance said, looking around the table for support. "Every single one of you agreed this was the best solution. Don't pretend you're innocent now." Janet started crying. Raymond tried to edge toward the door. Meredith was frantically deleting something on her phone. "I saved everything," Benny said loudly. "On the cloud. Daddy taught me about the cloud. He said it keeps things safe forever." The irony wasn't lost on me. Victor had taught our son about digital storage, and our son had used that knowledge to document his father's attempted murder. "How long?" I asked Victor directly. "How long have you been poisoning me?" He couldn't meet my eyes. 6 weeks. It was supposed to look like organ failure, natural. No one would have questioned it. Except a 7-year-old boy who loved his mother enough to pay attention, I said, holding Benny tighter. "That's when we heard them. Sirens. Multiple sirens getting closer, their wails cutting through the November night like avenging angels coming to answer a child's call for help. The sirens grew louder, and through the dining room windows, red and blue lights began painting the walls in alternating flashes. Constance ran to the window, her pearls clicking against each other as she moved. "Someone stop them at the gate!" "The gate code," Amber said helpfully, still too drunk to read the room. "Trent told me it's pound 3452 in case I ever needed to get in when he wasn't home." "Shut up!" Trent roared, but it was too late for silence, too late for secrets. That's when Benny did something I'll never forget. He climbed up onto the dining room table, standing right between the turkey platter and the boat of gravy, his small figure illuminated by the chandelier above. His voice rang out clear and strong, like a judge delivering a verdict. "Daddy, should I tell everyone about the poison in Mommy's medicine? The rat poison from the garage? I took pictures of you mixing it into her pills every Sunday night when you thought I was asleep." The dinner table froze completely. Forks clattered onto plates, wine glasses tipped over, their contents joining the spreading stains on Constance's precious tablecloth. Victor's face crumbled like wet paper. "Benny, son, you don't understand what you're saying." "I understand you're hurting Mommy." Benny pulled the old iPhone from his pocket again, swiping through it with the expertise of his generation. "Look, I have everything. January 15th, Daddy buying rat poison at Henderson's Hardware. January 22nd, Daddy on the phone with Grandma saying 3 milligrams should be undetectable. February 1st, Uncle Trent texting Daddy stick to the timeline or we're all screwed. "How did you get into my phone?" Victor whispered. "Your password is my birthday, Daddy. You told me that once when you were teaching me about keeping things secure. You said family dates make the best passwords because you never forget them." The front door burst open, and police officers flooded in, weapons drawn but pointed at the ground. Behind them came Mrs. Morrison, still in her apron from preparing her own Thanksgiving dinner, her face a mask of controlled fury. "Dina!" She rushed to me, wrapping her arms around both Benny and me. "When Benny sent me those files, I drove straight to the police station. I showed them everything." A detective in a brown suit stepped forward, his badge gleaming. "I'm Detective Walsh. We need everyone to remain where they are. This is now a crime scene." "This is ridiculous," Constance said, trying to summon her imperious tone. "This is a family dinner. You can't just barge in here." Detective Walsh held up his phone, showing a video playing on the screen. It was Constance herself, filmed through a cracked garage door, saying, "3 weeks more and we'll be free. Victor gets the insurance money, pays off his debts, and we all move forward. The little teacher will be gone, and Victor can find someone suitable." "That's inadmissible," she shrieked. "A child took that video. Children can't testify against their parents." "Actually," Detective Walsh said calmly, "in cases of attempted murder, they absolutely can. And this isn't testimony, it's evidence. Big difference." Benny was still standing on the table, my brave little warrior among the ruins of Thanksgiving dinner. I also recorded Daddy grinding up the pills, and I kept one of Mommy's medicine bottles from last week. Mrs. Morrison has it. She said it's evidence. Victor stood suddenly, and every officer's hand went to their weapon. But he wasn't running or fighting. He was collapsing, falling to his knees on his parents' expensive Persian rug. "I'm sorry," he sobbed. "I'm so sorry, Dina. Mom said it would be painless. She said you'd just go to sleep. She said Benny would be better off with the money than with a mother who could barely pay for his shoes. You were killing me because I couldn't buy our son new shoes fast enough." My voice was steady, but inside I was screaming. "The debts," Victor gasped between sobs. "I didn't just lose my job. I'd been gambling, online poker. I owed people, bad people. Mom said this was the only way. So you chose to murder your wife," Detective Walsh said, nodding to his officers. "Victor Whitman, you're under arrest for attempted murder. Constance Whitman, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder." As they read them their rights, Trent tried to slip toward the kitchen door, but an officer blocked him. "I need everyone to remain here for questioning." "I want to make a deal," Raymond said suddenly. "I have text messages. Group texts where they planned everything. I never agreed to it. I can testify." "You coward," Constance hissed as handcuffs clicked around her wrists. Nadine was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in black rivers. "I didn't think they'd really do it. I thought it was just talk. Just angry talk." "Angry talk doesn't include insurance policies and rat poison measurements," Detective Walsh said. Through it all, Benny stood on that table like a lighthouse in a storm, holding his phone high, the evidence of my salvation glowing on its screen. 6 months later, Benny and I live in a small apartment in Vermont, far from the Whitman estate and its poisoned memories. Our place has 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that gets actual sunlight, and a tiny balcony where we grow tomatoes in pots. It's nothing fancy, but the locks work and nobody here wants me dead, which feels like luxury now. The trials made national news. 7-year-old boy saves mother from family murder plot ran in every paper from Connecticut to California. Victor got 15 years for attempted murder. They found enough rat poison in my system to prove he'd been dosing me for 6 weeks, just shy of the lethal accumulation. Constance got 10 years for conspiracy to commit murder, though her lawyer fought for less. The judge, a grandmother herself, wasn't sympathetic to a mother-in-law who orchestrated her daughter-in-law's death over money. Trent got 5 years. The text messages Raymond turned over showed him suggesting methods, discussing timing, even researching which poisons metabolized fastest. Nadine got 2 years probation and mandatory psychiatric counseling. She claimed she thought they were joking, but her Google searches for Inheritance Law Connecticut and how long before widowers remarry suggested otherwise. Gerald, who genuinely didn't know about the murder plot, divorced Constance immediately. He sent me a check for $50,000 with a note that just said, "I'm sorry, I didn't protect you." I used it to start over, to get Benny therapy, to rebuild our lives from scratch. The insurance company not only voided Victor's policy, but awarded me damages for fraud and emotional distress. $300,000 sits in a trust for Benny's education. I won't touch it otherwise. That money has blood on it, even if the blood never actually spilled. "Why did you protect me?" I asked Benny one night last month, as I tucked him into his new bed with the dinosaur sheets he picked out himself. He looked at me with those serious, green eyes. "Because you read to me every night, even when you're tired. Because you make my lunch with notes inside that say I love you and draw smiley faces. Because when I had nightmares, you let me sleep in your bed even though I kick. Because you're my mommy, and nobody hurts my mommy." The truth is, children see everything. They absorb the tensions, the whispered conversations, the subtle cruelties we think we hide. Benny had been watching his father's family dismiss and belittle me for years. He heard Constance call me "that woman" instead of using my name. He noticed when they set my place at the table with the chipped dishes while everyone else got china. He saw his father's love for me die slowly, replaced by resentment and greed. When he sensed real danger, my 7-year-old became my guardian angel. He learned to use technology not for games, but for survival. He documented everything with the patience of a detective and the determination of a son who refused to lose his mother. Mrs. Morrison visits us sometimes. She brings cookies and stays for tea, and she and I watch Benny play in the small park across from our apartment. "He saved your life," she says every visit, like she still can't believe it. "I know," I tell her. "He saved both our lives." Because that's what would have happened after I died. Benny would have been raised by Victor and Constance, taught that money matters more than love, that family means conspiracy, that murder is just another business transaction. They would have killed his soul as surely as they tried to kill my body. Now every Thanksgiving, Benny and I volunteer at a women's shelter, serving dinner to survivors of domestic violence. We rename the holiday Grateful to Be Alive Day. We serve turkey and stuffing to women who escaped their own dinner tables of doom, their own families who turned predator. Last week, Benny's teacher asked the class to write about their heroes. Some kids wrote about athletes or YouTube stars. Benny wrote about his mom. She survived being poisoned and still makes me breakfast every morning. She goes to court to make sure bad people can't hurt others. She teaches me that family isn't about blood. It's about who loves you enough to keep you safe. But I know the truth. The real hero is a 7-year-old boy who loved his mother enough to save her life, who stood on a Thanksgiving table surrounded by would-be murderers and spoke truth into their darkness. The poison is gone from my medicine cabinet and from my life. My body has healed, though I still get tested every 3 months just to be sure. And Benny? He still keeps that old iPhone fully charged, just in case. Some habits, especially the ones that save your life, are worth keeping. We survived, we escaped, we're free. And that's the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the people who claim to love you are the ones capable of the greatest betrayal. But love, real love, the kind between a mother and child, can overcome even the darkest evil. If you found value in this story, please hit that like button below. Share it with someone who needs to hear that survival is possible, that children see more than we think, and that sometimes the smallest heroes cast the biggest shadows. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more true stories of survival, strength, and the unbreakable bonds that save us when everything else fails. Thank you for listening to our story. Stay safe, trust your instincts, and remember, when someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time.